Welcome to the Scalability Code, the podcast that helps you get out of the shit show and start growing your business. A few times each month, you'll hear stories and commentary from visionary entrepreneurs, EOS implementers, and fractional COOs about how they've taken businesses to level 10. And now, for your host, Matt Haney.
Thanks for joining us today on the Scalability Code. I'm your host, Matt Haney, here with Chris Davenport, another Texan from the great state of Texas, to report to you guys about some great things we're working on in our day. So, Chris, welcome to the Scalability Code. Thanks for taking out some time to join us.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me today.
Awesome. Well, like I always do, I like to jump in and we do talk a little bit of EOS. We talk a little bit of life. We talk a little bit of challenge, and we talk a little bit of fun. So why don't you set this up and let us know about yourself and a little bit of your backstory, and we'll jump into some questions and see where the road takes us.
Sure. So I started my journey really professionally, when I started off as a freshman in college and I was going pre-med. I dreamed of being an anesthesiologist, and I got a laptop for my graduation gift, and I immediately fell in love with technology. It was 1995, right there when AOL and all the internet things were starting to happen, changing time. And before my first class, I changed my major, changed my degree plan, went computer science, and I just never looked back. And then something really strange happened. I made a connection with some people that needed some IT help, and they didn't really know what to do. They were struggling with viruses, and their whole sales force of 64 people were down because of a virus. It was costing them money.
Literally.
And my dad at the time worked for this company, and he brought these computers home to take somewhere else to repair, and they couldn't repair them. And I said, well, let me take a look at one. And so I looked at one, and I figured out quickly how to fix it. And
with no experience, you were just curious?
I was curious. I got really excited about, I've always been a problem solver. And so that was the root of what was driving me. I was like, man, I want to solve this issue. So I didn't sleep till I figured it out. And, I think he brought home that day like 20 laptops. And so then
you're thinking, how am I going to get through all these?
Yes. Oh. Yes. Well, when I figured out one, it was like a 5-minute fix. It was the funny thing. It was like nothing in a few hours to, and then there was the joy in seeing them all fixed.
Right.
And at this point, I wasn't making any money off of this.
Right.
Just the thrill of solving the problem, figuring it out, the Rubik's Cube.
Right.
And so he took him back, and the CEO said, hey, tell him to come in tomorrow, right now, like yesterday. So he calls me and said, hey, and I'm up at school and an hour away. And he said, hey, CEO Tom Glazier wants you to come in and look at these computers. And I was like, okay, and I didn't know what to do. So I went in, and he said, can you fix these other 40? Because my salespeople are down. And they sold food to restaurants and things, a large food distributor. And I said, sure. So I fixed him, and he said, hey, why don't you come to work for us and come on staff? So that was my first client.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
And you stayed predominantly on hardware, or did you eventually kind of run into the managed services provider world where you were doing all sorts of different offerings for these folks?
That's exactly where I ended up. So it started as break fix, as we call it in our
Love it. Yeah.
world, and just transitioned all through word of mouth, and picked up client after client. And referrals are the best gift anyone can give, right?
Absolutely, especially in that space, because people that do well get tons of referrals. People that don't, don't do well, you're not getting a lot of phone calls because people talk about their managed service provider or easy target around the happy hour.
Yes. So, I still went to college, and fast forward, I was working 80-hour weeks and taking classes. It was kind of insane. I didn't sleep much. So while my friends were partying, I was working, and but I was having fun. I loved it. And, fast forward about, 7-8 years, I started helping competitors in the space that couldn't their people would get stuck on a problem. It'd be a Windows server upgrade and their system's down, and I'd come in and spend 2 or 3, 4 hours, and I'd have it figured out and get everything going again. So one of my competitors nicknamed me the Wolf, or the Cleaner, from Pulp Fiction.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
And I was like, I'll take it, So they'd call me in to clean up, and I got some notoriety around town here and San Antonio of being the cleaner. And I'd just go in and help other IT companies clean up messes. Not
And
without
did you stay on your own, or were you able to build a team, or sort of what was your goal there?
At this
Or
point,
maybe where was the goal and where did it end up? Or normally two different things.
yes, and at this point I stayed on my own, but there's only so many hours in the day.
Right.
So around that same, another 3 years, so around 2006 or so, I hired my first employee, and officially started a company and started growing, and then grew it to about 5 or 6 employees till around 2011. Then I merged with. I met an incredible friend, Mark Elliott's his name. He was in the copier business. So him and I merged to form a company together named 3i International.
Okay.
And
You
so
guys had 2 good recurring revenue businesses.
Yes.
Management and maintenance of copiers
You
and
got it.
MSP work. You got some stickiness right there. Those businesses could not operate without you, either of you in those times.
Yep. You fingered me right there. You
Yep.
pointed that, you caught us. So that's what we were after, that ARR
Yep.
and the stickiness. And so we use the copiers to get in the IT and vice versa.
Love
And
it. Love it.
So we grew that company to about 35 employees and up to about 20 million in revenue. And then we, sold it in 2003. We sold it in parts. So the copier piece we sold to Dex Imaging, and the IT side we sold to the 20 up in Plano.
Yeah. And when were they rolling up MSPs at that point? Was that sort of, it's still a very popular,
Yes.
private equity business model because of what we mentioned earlier, the stickiness of the revenue. But man, what a tough business to scale at times because it's all people, right? It's all people.
Oh, it is on both sides. People think, oh, it's a tech company. No, it's a people company. You're
Absolutely.
serving people, and as soon as you realize that, you start to get traction.
Yep.
And but it's fun. Yeah, the 20's still rolling up. I helped them implement EOS. And
That's right. During the moment or after the fact?
before.
Okay.
So before we sold to them, implemented EOS, went and worked as their COO for a while just to help them out till they
Right.
found the right fit. And so then I went back to running 3i, and then we ended up selling to them because we built a relationship over time and just really liked Tim, the owner, and it seemed like the perfect fit. So
That's awesome. That's really, really, really cool. And what a great story of taking it from one place to the next and understanding what the needs are and making sure that you're helping folks out along the way. Yeah, I also have a background in service-based businesses, and I've lived through a couple mergers and acquisitions, and kind of often joke that the only businesses I've ever started are the hard ones because I never have had these recurring revenue opportunities.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
been so transaction based in my whole business career that it's like, man, kind of wish there was a business that had some sticky recurring revenue. Well, tell me, how'd you get to EOS? Like, what was your entry point into the business or into EOS as an implementer?
I shared with you all the fun parts, right? So there were some moments that were tough, and we ran into at 3i, we ran into some issues where we had a CFO that was embezzling money, and we found out after, and it was all cleaned up, and he paid it back and everything. So that ended well, but some maturity lessons there, right? Trusting a little too much, and then and thank God that I could trust my partner, and he
Right.
trust me. I mean, we're still talk every week, and then we had just some growing pains. We got tangled up in $1 million lawsuit. $1 million+ lawsuit by a large company that ended up filing bankruptcy. And so but it still cost us over $1 million.
Yeah.
And
Well, not to mention the blood, sweat, and tears that go along with
Yes.
litigation, and even if you're innocent, you still have to prove that, and that's expensive. And
Yes.
and big business has a lot more money to throw around at small business and intimidate and all the things. It's tough. I've been there both with a
Yes.
client and personally as well.
So yes, and it is tough. You're right. And that's where we found EOS. It was just it had us at each other's throats, and the business, I don't want to say it wasn't in trouble, but it was definitely on the rocks to some extent. And we had immense growth, had all of that happen, and that was our largest client. So we lost our largest client. Then they were suing us and every other vendor they had.
Right.
So it all went away, but it cost us $1 million in legal fees, and I had to become an expert in being deposed, which I'm thankful for that, actually.
Yeah.
And so we found EOS to really get traction on what levers do we need to to pull and push in the business. Where do we need protections and safeguards? Where do we need processes? Because at this point it was we had hired people that were evangelical about us,
Right.
and evangelical about what we were doing. And then you scale out of that. At some point, it's hard to find those people, and then you're just hiring people that need need direction, and we didn't have that.
Yeah. So
that's
who introduced you to it? How'd you find it? Sort of what was that process like? And
Mark was in EO. We were both
Okay.
in EO, but his EO chapter, typically when you're partners, you're in separate chapters or groups. So
Yes,
he was
I'm
in a
familiar.
separate group, and he was introduced to EOS there. And then so we, hired Kurt Schneiber as our implementer. Excellent human being.
out of Houston? Where's he in Austin?
He's Houston, and he does some work in Utah. But
Okay.
people call him the EOS guru. So he's been in it 10 years.
Oh, that's great.
Yes. So he implemented, and then he ultimately encouraged me to become an implementer myself.
Well, shout out to Kurt. We need to have him on here and hear his stories. We got to
Yeah.
make sure you get him on here.
Yes, his story is incredible.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you met him through referral, EO referral. And
Yep.
any idea how long ago that was? Like, when did you guys originally get spun up?
2015.
Oh, wow. Decade ago.
Yeah, 2016.
That's awesome.
Right. We were one of his first 10 clients, I think.
Oh, it's so cool.
Yeah. So
That's rad.
it's great.
And so fast forward 10 years later or so, actually, I don't know how long. Tell us about your implementer journey and sort of where that got started.
So once I knew that we were planning on selling, Mark had moved to the Dallas area, and so it was time to make a move to sell. It was we decided to sell because the space was getting, there's some litigious things going on with where the lines are drawn with cybersecurity.
Right.
And we saw the roll-ups happening, and we knew Tim, the owner of the 20, very well, and thought, that it was probably a good time to start posturing to make a sale. And then all that was really left was to negotiate the sale of the copier side. So the copier sale took over a year. The 20, I think, because Tim and I and Mark knew each other so well, it took like 3 months and we were done. It was just,
Wow. That's
it was
pretty
already-
awesome. You guys worked through a lot of those details early on and eliminated some of the nonsense that comes in negotiations.
there was that level of trust that was already there with him.
Right.
And I think he was trusting what we were showing him, and it just made it, and still to this day, we didn't have any issues.
That's awesome.
So that just made it. And then so I started planning my trajectory to ramp up my practice during those times. Started getting clients on the EOS side, and actually my first conference room was the conference room of 3i International. So
That's awesome.
it was just right there, and we just put a sign on the door and let the employees know, hey, meeting. We'd tell them ahead of time, but
Yeah.
so it was pretty cool to do both at the same time and watch one kind of wind down and the other one pick up.
And
So
how long ago was that? So how long have you been doing full-time implementation?
20, really, I started full time in 2023.
Okay.
But I started that process in like 22,
Yeah.
doing both at the same time. So
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. And tell me a little bit about some of the clients. Do you see, I guess I always say, give me the smallest and the biggest. No, you don't have to share numbers, obviously, but an example of their companies and then, industries and part of my goal here is to show the diversity of the platform and not the fact that it's a shoe fits only one size model.
Yes. So, and that's a great way to look at it, because it can be fit to these different sizes organizations.
Sure.
So I would say the smallest would be, I have a realtor team, Walter Baring, Sotheby's. He is one of the most successful realtors here in the Houston area.
Love that.
I think his transactions were over 100 million last year.
Good for him. Those guys are crushing it.
And last year was a down year in the real estate. So he's a luxury inside the loop here, River Oaks, Memorial, but they're a team of, the team is the team. So he's got a team of 4 people and they all help him in various ways. So if you read Traction, they're like the leadership team only. Well, this is really his leadership team.
This is it. Yep.
And so you've got a marketing person, you've got and someone that's the integrator, you've got someone over, customer experience. He's over sales, and then you have, someone else that's like, that's just an assistant that runs anything else.
Yeah.
That's
Everything, transaction coordination and titles and all closing, all that stuff.
So you would think at face value, like, I don't know if EOS is a fit, but these realty teams are using it. Him and others like Laura Sweeney uses it, another big name in town, and they're killing it. And it works. And
it does. So
the
they're on
same.
the smaller side. Tell me about some of the bigger companies and complexities around that you've seen.
So one of them, it would be the 20, the one that we sold to, and they're currently, I would guess, I don't have any inside knowledge, but they've ramped up to about $500 million in revenue.
Wow. How many different offices do you think they have?
Probably 35.
And they're all independently operating on EOS, but also as a holding company as well?
Well, they've rolled them up. So the leadership team is in Plano, and they're running on EOS principles. And so a lot of these owners have turned into employees that own stock.
Right.
And so all management decisions are done out of, the leadership team. So it works quite well. But their leadership team, even before they graduated, was, I think there was like 8 of them. It was pretty big size because there's a lot, you've got projects, you've got, customer experience, you've got hiring, you've got all kinds of stuff going on in there.
Yep.
And
are you still doing sessions with them?
I don't do sessions for them. They've fully graduated, and their integrator / COO is doing their quarterlies and annuals internally. So they're set up for success, and they've been running on it since 2020.
That's fantastic.
And I helped them before EOS went franchise. So I did that when I was just base camper, as we call it.
That's awesome. You are listening to the Scalability Code. I'm your host, Matt Haney, founder of Sinclair Ventures, and we help visionary entrepreneurs like you get out of the shit show and focus on growing your business. We offer fractional COO and leadership coaching services that free up that brain of yours to focus on what's next. Learn more about us at sinclairventures.com. Now back to it. You mentioned before we caught up that you also have some interest in AI or companies or tech companies inside AI. And it's one of those things where I feel like I don't consider myself an early adopter at all, but I'm committed to saying the word on a daily and weekly basis in hopes that I continue to learn and gain more knowledge about it so that I can impart that wisdom on companies and also friends and family and whatever. So give me a little bit of your experience with AI. You're obviously a tech-driven human based on your background, and tell me what you're seeing out there in AI, or a company you've worked with, or things you've seen that business owners could benefit from knowing about.
I'm seeing people use it in different ways, and it's fun being in the session room because I work with tech companies, insurance agencies, but then I also have like a steel building manufacturer
Yep.
and this the real estate team. So the real estate team, they're starting to use AI to digest these inspection reports that you
Love
get
it.
when you
Yeah.
buy a house. And instead of reading the 50-page thing with a bunch of junk in there,
Yep.
hey, tell me what I need to know. And it spits it out in 30 seconds.
It's awesome.
And the insurance agency space, it's being used to set appointments and to make dials.
Yeah.
I have another oil and gas customer that they're using it to set appointments to sell shares in oil wells. And so I would say a lot of it right now, you think AI and you think all of this critical thinking and these
Right.
massive problems. Well,
Right.
the way the consumers are using it now is to augment staff where they have, problems finding the right fit or hiring or managing. You can have an AI LLM, it can do like 1,000 dials in an hour, and it's just, I know it's just nuts.
Crazy
And
to me.
so you start to think about that, and that's humanly impossible,
Yeah.
for
Literally.
one person to do. And by the way, you've paid instead of a $5,000 a month salary or whatever you're going to pay the person, it's a couple of $1,000s to do that a month,
Yep.
and so it's just nuts. And
I find it to be, and I still use it for some of the simple things and editing job descriptions and synthesizing down large documents to details. And I finally found a good note-taking platform that I like that actually has a desktop application. That might sound silly, but it's a differentiator for me, is to have this desktop application that I can run in the background while I'm in meetings and not have to toggle between browser windows, et cetera. And so I love the kind of cheap type of things that are out there for it. But I do hear what you're saying. I think there's there's worlds we just don't know about that this is going to unlock. And I still, know and believe wholeheartedly there's no AI engine that's going to replace the creativity that a human can bring, and the spontaneity and the wisdom. But I do think there's ways that we can certainly embrace it and help our clients use it and push them into it. Not of course, forcefully,
Yes.
but like encourage them to see that there are ways out there that if we're open to it, can benefit everybody.
I agree, and I think that here's the way I look at AI right now is if you're not using it, you are going to be left behind. But it's because the person next to you is going to be using it.
Right. Right.
And it's not going to replace you, but
Sure.
someone that uses it is going to best you in whatever it is that you do.
Absolutely.
And that's where I see it going. Now, Microsoft came out with something a couple of days ago that was a pretty shocking statement, but I as soon as I read it, I see it happening in my head. They say that AI will replace all software at some point in the future. And I can see
bold
it
statement.
because, well, it is, but AI is such a good coder compared to a programmer that I could see this happening. I could see it.
Crazy. Just the
I know.
ability of to try to think about it replacing a human that's writing code, very unique,
Yep.
specific code for a very unique, specific reason.
Yep.
That there's some learning model that can replicate or duplicate that is crazy.
Well, and Duolingo just laid off all their contractors. I don't know if
Really?
you've read this. Yes, because AI and LLM is sitting there doing translations.
That's crazy.
They don't have to hire. I feel kind of sad for the contractors,
Right.
but they figured it out, and the CEO's like, "Yeah, we're full steam ahead using AI to translate, and we're done with contractors." It's amazing.
That's nuts. Well, you also said you have some experience with law firms. Tell me about that. How'd you get into that world, and what are you seeing? You're not the first person I've heard that has a niche within law firms. And I love that space because, man, a bunch of lawyers in a room trying to run a business is a daunting task at times.
Well, I told you on the onset, I like a problem. I like to solve problems, right? So I, and a lot of implementers you talk to are, they don't like to deal with law firms for two reasons. One, they're hard to facilitate because they're lawyers. They're
Right.
hard to keep control of the room. The second reason is they reschedule a lot. So because they
That's
have
funny.
court,
I didn't
they
even
have
think
court
about
dates.
that. But are they
Yeah.
notorious for rescheduling? That's funny.
Notorious for rescheduling.
That would be annoying as shit.
Yes, yes, and but I love working with them. Like
Yeah.
one of them that's here in town, Maverick Ray. He is one of the most successful criminal defense attorneys in Houston,
Wow.
and he's an awesome guy to work with. But he's got a big team. So EOS typically you have 3 or 4, maybe 5 people,
Right.
and he was kind of small like the real estate team, and he wanted to start with his paralegals in there because they were helping him manage, and he didn't really know what he wanted. And sidebar, this was kind of early in my EOS career, and I was telling him, hey, only bring the people you want, in the room long term.
Right.
Like who would you share payroll reports with? And I was going through these questions. We kind of helped these people paint a picture. So we ended up with like 7 people on the leadership team, which was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And 3 of them are lawyers. And so you're in the room in there and you're having to facilitate and control the room. And it can be challenging. And I'll tell you, after those days, I'm pretty worn out. But I look at it as a challenge to go against one of the best lawyers in Houston.
Right.
And of course, he'd beat my pants off in a debate in a courtroom. But calling him out, saying, "Hey, Maverick, are you sure about that? Why don't you let so and so say something? Those types of things that
Right.
happen." And it works for them, and it's a ton of fun, and they're a great group. But lawyers are fun. I had some experience with all of the litigation we went through at 3i that I spent a lot of time around lawyers, and I just enjoyed that space.
That's really cool. Well, good for you for jumping into that pool because
Yeah.
you're right. General contractors don't like building houses for lawyers, and I can imagine what it's like to
Yeah.
sit in a session room with
Yeah.
some strong-willed litigators who.
Yep.
But I'm to their point, anybody that has an interest in learning and is willing to be taught is a prospect for education, right?
Yes, and that's the other fun thing just about EOS in general. When you're in these rooms with these people in these successful companies, you learn stuff. They're learning from you.
Right.
I'm also learning from them. And
Absolutely.
It's so much
Absolutely. Well, let's segue into a question I have for everyone, which is what's the hardest, in your opinion, what's the hardest part about managing people? That's a big question. But I'm not going to lead you into some examples because then you would just pick on those examples and iterate on them. But what's your opinion on what's hardest about managing a group of people?
My opinion, and I've thought a lot about this and reflecting on many moments where when I was younger, I had the wrong response to things. And as I aged and went through therapy and read books and had more experiences, for me, the hardest piece is it boils down to the emotional response that happens when something happens. And that may sound like word soup, but when say there's an employee or a teammate that's off track and you're a business owner, your kids are dependent on him or her performing.
Right.
And they're in there slacking off on Facebook, let's just say. And so your first response might be, this guy, he's stealing from me. He's just screwing off and
Riding the clock and not doing his job.
And so you might have your emotional response may be anger, it may be disgust, it may be And it's hard to, as humans, to manage that. And then the
Yeah.
same on the other side, it's hard for them to manage when you come at them, whether you're measured or not, they have an emotional response back to you.
I mean, guilty. Emotional
Yeah.
response. I
Same.
mean, I had an exchange yesterday with a client,
Yeah.
actually. Guy
Yeah.
that's signing my checks,
Okay.
who is a very smart guy, but I essentially was questioning his adherence to his own core values based on a couple responses. And actually, at the end of the call, or closer to the end of the call, we were going back and forth on the subject, and I basically said, "Hey, I need to end this call. I feel like I need to get off now."
Yeah.
And he was escalated, and I was escalated, and I just said, "We're not going to get anywhere productive."
Yeah.
And so why don't we talk tomorrow at 2 o'clock? And called him back, and the first thing I said is, "Hey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I got elevated and that I, had an emotional response, and I was
Yeah.
triggered, and I apologize.
Mhm.
I'm guilty." And he was receptive of the apology, and we talked a little more about the topic. And I said, "Why don't we just, kind of go heads down for a minute and come up with some suggestions on how to move it, and then bring it back together?"
Yeah.
And man, we're still humans, thankfully.
Yes.
And we still have emotional responses. But
Yeah.
to your point, navigating that
It's tough.
is tough, especially
Yeah.
as a leader, right? Because you're looked at through the microscope, and they're just going, they want, they don't, people don't want to see you melt down
Yes.
or whatnot. But
Yeah.
sometimes we're held to standards, and we should be held to standards that our employees aren't necessarily held to, because we're the leader of the division or the branch of the business or whatever.
Yes. And Matt, kudos for saying, taking a pause, because a lot of people, their ego won't allow that.
Yeah.
And so I just see where leaders will get upset and they'll, start to talk curt or harsh to their teammates or their leadership team, or even the people under them.
Yeah.
And nothing good comes out of that.
No.
And
No.
it's best to share constructive things. And then if they start to have a response, get curious and ask questions so they start to think of their response. And I find that helps a lot.
Yeah. No, I think you hit a word I use a lot, and it's something I don't think we can say enough, is be curious.
Yeah.
Be curious as to a different way. Be curious to how it's making another person feel. Be curious to see if there's an unintended consequence. So curiosity over criticism is something I
Yeah.
try to say a lot, which is, if we're leading with curiosity, then we're less likely to be critical, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So a couple other questions before I let you go. You said you have some hobbies outside of work that include CrossFit and maybe an obsession with Porsches in general. So I know which one I'd rather talk about.
Yeah.
So, but let's get CrossFit out of the way, and then we can talk about cars.
I just love a good workout, and I like, much like, work. I like working with people.
Yeah.
So it's the same with working out. I like working out with a team of people, and it's fun. And there is no better feeling after that workout that just to start the day with that. I usually work out at, 5 a.m.
Yeah.
and I'm ready to start my day, and it's just awesome.
That's awesome. Well, I am a newly minted 5:30 workout person. I was, for 20 years. My wife would get up early, and she would work out and come back and then get the kids going. And then after they left for school, I would go work out and kind of start my day at 8 or 9 after I start. And now, for whatever reason, role reversal over the last year, I've gone to a 5:30 class, not a CrossFit class, but a small group fitness class that I love, where we focus on CrossFit type movements without the strenuous nature and impact of them. But the point is that committing to that early morning has been empowering to me, and
Yes.
I fought it for so long. But man, coming home and getting to see my kids in the morning before they go to school, and having a cup of coffee while they're getting ready, and is awesome. So have you always been a 5 or 5:30 guy?
I have. I haven't always done CrossFit. I used to be a runner. I still
yeah.
love to run, but I can't sleep in. I wake up at 4:30 to 5 without an alarm, and always been that way. And
Get up and go.
Yes.
You're up, you might as well go.
yep, I'm gonna get the day before the day gets me.
Love it. All right, now tell me about the fun part. Tell me about the cars.
I just love. So I always dreamt of when I was a kid of having a Porsche, and so as soon as I could, when I was, like I told you earlier, I started early. So when I was 18, 19, I started making some money, and I didn't have any expenses. I didn't.
Yeah, at that age,
know.
you don't have anything.
Yeah.
Rent and food, maybe.
Yeah. So I bought this 1976 911 Targa. It was red, and it had been rebuilt and
Air cooled?
air cooled. And so I was driving that around when I went to college. I was driving it around, and then I kept it for a while. And back then, I mean, I paid like $12,000 for this car, which was
A lot of money 30
a
years
lot.
ago.
But now they're like, I don't know, 50 grand.
Yeah,
And
they're coveted. That old generation pre liquid cooled. Yeah.
I should have kept it, but
Yep.
then I traded it for a 981 930 turbo, and then drove it for a while. Then, then I had other cars, in between. But then
Yeah.
I kept finding my way back there.
Do you have any vintage ones now, or do you go back to the old school, or you new tech guy now?
Just new because I still have young kids, so I'm in a Taycan Turbo S right now.
Yeah, fun.
I had a GT3 RS for a while.
Yes.
It was a ton of fun,
Yeah.
but the values of those went up. I was just afraid to drive it, so I
No,
sold
I
it.
hear you. But man, what a fun car. I got to drive one of those around a track in Vegas
Oh,
and
man.
have the video and
Yeah.
I was just like, the adage, drive it like you stole it. I mean, I was
Yes.
pedal down, maybe.
Yeah.
Just going through
That's
them all.
fun.
Yeah.
That sounds like
That
a
is an
blast.
incredible car.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. Really
Yeah.
cool.
So I just figured I did, have to drive somewhat because I'm living in Houston.
Right. You're always on the road.
And I wanted to have fun while I was driving. So that's kind of what it was rooted in. It wasn't for, some people buy them for their status. It was just to enjoy it.
Yeah, no, they're so great.
Yeah.
But those old ones, man, they're so rigid, right? I think it's
I know. Yes.
they're fun little cars and speed bumps and potholes and all those things. They'll catch you in the lower back chiropractic
will.
appointment after
I
time.
will. Yep. That's right.
Awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, hey, I thank you for your time today. It's great to catch up and chat, and I look forward to getting to know you as we continue our EOS journey, and love just sharing stories and hearing how your business has grown. And maybe next time I'm down in Houston, I can come over and have lunch or grab a beer with you.
That would be awesome. Yeah, let's stay
Awesome.
in touch. It's
Yeah.
great talking to you.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Have a great week, and thanks for joining us on the Scalability Code.
Thanks, Matt.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Scalability Code. If you made it this far, please follow the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Let's get out of the show together. We'll see you next time on the Scalability Code.